Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko said that Belarus and Russia have one army fighting against Ukraine. He said, if they want to fight to either the last Ukrainian or the last Polish, we are ready to eliminate them. Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko met with Russian Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu in Minsk. He said, I think the Belarusian defense minister has already briefed you on the situation in Belarus, on the training and combat coordination of Belarusian and Russian units deployed in Belarus. I should say we have approached this matter very seriously. Both our and your officers train Belarusian and Russian soldiers, so that, if necessary, our defenders could repel any aggression. Here I am talking about everything we need, including medical kits, uniforms, and weapons. There are no any divisions, we are a single group of forces, a single army. We are getting ready today, everybody knows about it. We are not hiding it. In today's world it is impossible to hide such things. He stressed that he was not going to scare anyone and opined on the opponent's readiness to resolve the situation. If they want our region to live peacefully, both Russia and Belarus are ready for this. If they want to fight to either the last Ukrainian or the last Polish or the last mercenary, well, this is their right to do so. However, neither I nor our special services see that they are ready for full-fledged negotiations and for any reasonable agreement. Belarusians will do everything they must according to our agreement. Alexander Lukashenko recalled that the day before he had a telephone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin. He said, he called me yesterday. It was a long conversation. We discussed the situation around Belarus and Russia. He said you were going to visit here and that we would continue the discussion. We will develop a common position in terms of our further actions to protect our territorial integrity. In turn, Sergei Shoigu thanked Belarus for hospitality, primarily with regard to the military who are in Belarus as part of the Joint Regional Task Force. They really feel at home here. The people are hospitable and the military are doing everything to achieve greater cohesion, greater combat coordination, he said. On the other side, Belarusian lawmakers gave their initial backing to a proposal to introduce the death penalty for treasonous officials and soldiers, and to make discrediting the army a criminal offense punishable by up to 4 years in jail. The Russian ally currently has the death penalty for crimes such as murder or for people who commit, plan or intend to commit acts of terrorism. The lower house voted in the first reading to introduce the death penalty specifically for officials or soldiers found guilty of treason. The parliament said this was needed in order to exert a deterrent effect on destructive elements, as well as to demonstrate a determined fight against treason. In recent months, Russian President Vladimir Putin said he will send nuclear-capable Iskander missile systems to the Belarus-Ukraine border. He also said NATO will cause the unification of Russia and Belarus in a near future. Putin said Russia will transfer nuclear-capable Iskander-M missile systems to its ally Belarus over the coming months. Putin told Lukashenko at a meeting in St. Petersburg the missile systems can use both ballistic and cruise missiles, both in conventional and nuclear versions, according to the Kremlin. Putin said, decision was made in our country, within the next several months, we will transfer to Belarus the Iskander-M tactical missile systems, which are known to use both ballistic and cruise missiles, both conventional and nuclear. Belarus continues to support the Russian war against Ukraine, hosts and accommodates Russian servicemen, and provides training grounds. Throughout the war, Russia has been using Belarus as staging grounds to first invade northern Ukraine in February-March 2022, and subsequently, to launch air and drone strikes at Ukraine's civilian infrastructure. Lukashenko said his country will deploy a regional group of military forces with Russia in response to Poland allegedly militarizing its border with Belarus. The remarks from Lukashenko indicate a potential further escalation of the war in Ukraine. He said, strikes on the territory of Belarus are not just being discussed in Ukraine today, but are also being planned. Their owners are pushing them to start a war against Belarus to drag us there. We have been preparing for this for decades. If necessary, we will respond. He also added that he had spoken to Russian President Vladimir Putin about the situation while at a meeting in St. Petersburg. Belarus's army has about 60,000 people. Earlier this year, Belarus deployed 6 battalion tactical groups, totaling several thousand people, to the border areas. Recently, the head of Belarus's border guards accused Ukraine of provocations at the border. Russian forces used Belarus as a staging post for their February 24 invasion of Ukraine, sending troops and equipment into northern Ukraine from bases in Belarus. On the other side, Polish authorities said Polish citizens in Belarus should leave the country as relations between the two countries become increasingly tense, in part due to the war in Ukraine. They said, "We recommend that Polish citizens staying on the territory of the Republic of Belarus leave its territory with available commercial and private means." Relations between Warsaw and Minsk deteriorated in 2021 when Poland accused its eastern neighbor of orchestrating a migrant crisis on its border, and have become even more strained since the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Warsaw says that the Polish minority in Belarus faces repression from the state, with some community leaders having been imprisoned. Poland's ambassador to the EU Andrzej Sados appealed to EU institutions to admonish Belarus for getting involved in the war against Ukraine and aiding Russia. He further admonished Belarus for making provocations that would target the authorities in Kyiv. On the other side, Ukrainian General Serhiy Naiv said, "Belarus will attack us when they receive the appropriate command from Russia. When the Belarus regime is pressed to the limit, that's when they would be capable of such a thing. Our army is in full control of the situation. If there is a change in the enemy's posture, we will adapt our forces accordingly." On the other side, Vladimir Putin has claimed that the Western response to his war in Ukraine is pushing Russia and Belarus towards unification. He said, "Unprecedented political and sanctions pressure from the collective West is pushing Russia and Belarus to speed up the unification process. After all, it is easier to minimize the damage from illegal sanctions, it is easier to master the production of demanded products, develop new competencies and expand cooperation with friendly countries." Putin did not go into detail on what an extended alliance with Belarus would look like, but Ukrainian officials have been sounding the alarm that Russia is looking to bring Belarus into the war as the conflict drags on. The Russian president's comments come just days after NATO announced it was not only expanding its membership by adding Sweden and Finland but was increasing its military presence throughout Europe. Belarusian president has thus far been able to keep Minsk's direct involvement out of the war in Ukraine, but comments by Putin suggest this may not be the case for long.